Wolves are one of the most dangerous predators on the planet, and as such they can be vicious and violent animals. So when a wolf found a baby after a car crash, her father thought the worst. But what happened next shocked him. Hello friend, if you enjoy this story, please subscribe and like the video for more amazing stories. Florence and Jack lived and worked in a large city in the center of Russia. They had fast-paced and exciting jobs, and it was through their work that they met each other. Florence was a brand representative for the company they both worked for, and Jack was in sales, and it just so happened that during one meeting they bumped into each other. There were sparks from the very beginning. Jack loved how beautiful she was, and how easygoing and relaxed she seemed to be, and Florence couldn't resist Jack's roguish charm. Before too long, they met up again, and then again, until one day they became an item. Jack and Florence really were a power couple, dominating the business that they worked in. They lived in a big fancy house, drove luxury cars, and attended lavish, expensive parties. They really were living the high life. But nothing could quite compare to the day that Florence found out she was pregnant. She and Jack had not particularly been trying to conceive. However, now that she was pregnant, they were both overjoyed. They would be able to bring a baby into their perfect world, and their family would be complete. Just as Florence and Jack were really getting excited about having a child and bringing their young one into their world, disaster struck. The business that they were both working for suddenly collapsed. It essentially ran out of money, which meant that all of the employees, including Jack and Florence, found themselves without a job, literally overnight. This was a devastating blow, and their balloon quite unexpectedly popped. It wasn't long until the couple was struggling financially. No longer could they attend the parties they once had, or go to the places they used to. In fact, they had to sell their big house and move somewhere smaller outside of the city near the forest. It was a sad and terrible fall from grace, but nothing could be done about it. Florence and Jack just had to cope if they wanted their baby to have a chance of living a happy life. They moved into a small remote house and made money by doing menial jobs in and around a nearby village. They didn't pay much, but they were honest and reliable and made them relatively happy. To save some pennies on food, Jack would go into the forest and hunt in order to eat. There were plenty of deer around, and the meat was nice and tasty and would last them up to a week. But one day he came across an animal that he wasn't expecting, a giant, angry, hungry-looking wolf. It seemed that the wolf had been hunting the same deer as Jack, but the sound of his gun shooting had scared him. The beast glared at him through the trees, but instead of turning his gun on it, Jack did something unexpected. He offered the deer carcass to the wolf. It clearly needed it, more than he did. The wolf snuffed the carcass and looked at Jack gratefully. Before dragging its meat off into the depths of the woods, Jack had been in the forest many times and had never seen the wolf before. It must have been a chance encounter, but it was one that he would remember for the rest of his life. He knew that they were apex predators and could quickly and easily kill any prey that they wanted to, but this unique and amazing-looking wolf had really impressed him. Just as Jack lost track of it, his phone started to ring. It was Florence. She had gone into labor. By the time Jack had rushed to the hospital, Florence had already given birth to a beautiful baby girl. Jack was in awe of this beautiful little human that they had created. He had never been happier, not even when they had been rich and living their amazing life. This little baby girl was his purpose in life now, and he alongside Florence would raise her properly. They named their little girl Amelia, and for the next few days they tended to her every whim. They fed her, loved her, cared for her, and were the best parents that they could be. But as Jack was driving along one day, with Amelia in her car seat next to him, something tragic happened. It was a stormy and windy day, and as Jack drove along, a tree fell right in front of the car. He had very little time to react, and he hit the trunk while driving pretty fast. The car flipped, and Jack banged his head on the window. As it skidded to a halt, he blacked out. When he awoke, Jack was a little dazed and confused. Luckily, he had sustained no serious injuries, and he quickly looked across to Amelia to check she was okay as well. However, she wasn't there. Where was she? What had happened while he had been unconscious? Panicking, Jack climbed out of the wreckage and looked for his newborn baby, but there was no sign of her. Reaching for his phone, Jack called Florence and blurted out everything that had happened to his wife. She rushed out to meet him and helped him look for the baby. But still, no one could find Amelia.
As authorities turned up on the scene, Jack refused to be treated by the paramedics. All that he cared about was finding his little girl. Where was Amelia? How could they not find her? She was still so young and defenseless and innocent, and it broke Jack and Florence's heart to think that she was out there somewhere. The police immediately started searching the area for the little girl, hunting high and low, but as night started to close in, it became clear that Amelia was nowhere to be found. Neither Jack nor Florence were going to accept that answer, and they searched through the night in the wind and rain and darkness. But the next morning brought some answers in a way that no one would have ever expected. Rather than searching the roads, Jack headed out into the woods near the spot the crash had happened. He searched the immediate area before moving further and further out, and as he searched in a particularly dense bit of forest, Jack spotted something. The blanket that Amelia had been wrapped in. He let out a panicked gasp. Why was it all the way out here? Running over to it, he picked it up and held it against him. It was wet and dirty, but it was definitely Amelia's. That's when he heard a noise behind him, a crashing and swishing, as if a large animal were tracking or hunting him. Slowly turning around, Jack was face to face with a wolf, and not just any wolf, it was the same one that he had encountered a week before. His heart sank, but not because he was fearing for his life. The reason Jack felt so crestfallen was because the wolf had a scrap of Amelia's dress hanging from its mouth. Had this hungry wolf actually eaten the baby, he couldn't bear thinking about it. The wolf turned away and slowly walked off, looking back as if telling Jack to follow him. Jack walked after it, afraid of what he was going to find. Once more, those thoughts of wolves being apex predators popped into his head, and he held back tears as he followed the giant animal. But as he rounded a big tree and looked into a small opening, Jack fell to his knees. Was there, laying in the open, was Amelia. She cooed and made small noises as she laid there, her clothes damp, torn and dirty. Jack ran up to Amelia and scooped her up, tightly embracing her and crying. He couldn't believe she was alive, but why was she all the way out there in the forest? Well, what he didn't know was that the wolf had seen the crash and done the unthinkable. It had plucked the baby from its seat, carrying it to safety. It must have been the wolf's instinct as a parent to protect the young child, and it had done a good job too, as it had kept the little girl alive. Jack looked at the wolf and it slowly bowed its head. Jack could never be sure, but it was almost as if the hungry wolf had repaid his kindness for offering it a meal when it had needed it the most. Before heading back out of the woods and back to Florence, Jack whispered the words, "Thank you," to the wolf. He would never be able to repay it, but he most certainly would never forget this kind and incredible act.
Have you ever heard of a wolf being so maternal and looking after a child in this way? And what do you think about this story? Thank you for watching this video, and if you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like and subscribe for more.